Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we have a special request video. I've been asked about infographics. So if you like the video, make sure to hit the like button and please do subscribe. You'll get notifications whenever I post a new video. So what are infographics? Fundamentally, an infographic is a visual representation of data or information. And the reason why we use infographics is to make things that are like super complex a lot more accessible. If we're talking about statistics or data, some of us can readily read statistical information and absorb it, but a lot of us are not as numerically inclined. So it helps to have a chart of some sort to represent that. And an infographic is just a step up from the usual figure 1, figure 2 representation that you see. There's a lot of different forms that an infographic can take, but what's key is that the infographic is using visuals to display complex information in a way that's a lot easier for us to understand. So when do we use an infographic? Like I said, for numerical information, infographics can be really, really helpful. Infographics can also be super helpful when you're comparing things. So visual comparisons, and I'll show some examples of that later. Visually, you can play with scale, so you can make some things bigger than others. And that is an immediate way for people to recognize, okay, this is actually super important. I want to share a few examples of infographics that I think are good. And a lot of these examples are from the coronavirus, which I guess is where a lot of information is coming from right now. But it's also a really complex issue. There's a lot of data coming out, probably more data collected than any other disease. And so it's hard to sometimes decipher what's important or what the sort of true results are. And so I think infographics have been really useful during this period in helping those of us that aren't scientists and aren't doctors to understand where major risks lie and sort of how to properly react during the coronavirus. So example number 1 is sort of like a heat map, and it shows different activities that we all engage in and their level of risk during coronavirus. So for example, it has things like sports and things like getting a haircut. So everyday activities that we all engage in, but you can see on the map where the various risk lies. Color is an indicator and scale is an indicator. Now, the reason why I think this infographic is so good is that it visually takes things that we do every day and it makes it very easy to see quickly whether or not we should do them. If you read a long list of all these different activities, you might have trouble deciphering, where the actual risk was. Colors naturally attract our attention, spark thought. So seeing something in red is a kind of red flag, if you will, that you shouldn't do it. So I think this is a super effective infographic because it takes a lot of information and it breaks it down in a way that you can immediately figure out what the main point is and then create judgments based on that. So example number 2 also plays with scale. This is more of a pie chart, although it isn't your typical pie chart with slices, is broken down into subsections of different shapes. And it relates to carbon emissions of different countries. And based on the size of the portion of the circle that country has, the greater their carbon emissions. So this pie chart uses scale and color, like the heat map. And the lighter the color, the less, carbon emissions, and the darker the color, the greater. So it's almost like a cloud that's getting denser. And I think that responds to us on a metaphorical level as well. We equate the dark color with oil, with dirty air. And so the darker it gets, the more you can see the carbon emissions. And so this is also useful because it has a bar graph at the bottom that shows the amount of carbon emissions you would have seen in your lifetime depending on your age. So there's 2 different data sets being displayed here in 2 different ways, but together they really paint a picture of where carbon emissions are coming from, who's seeing them the most, and where there's a lot of impact for change. If you're a young person my age and say you live in China, you might have seen the most carbon emissions in the world based on this graph. And so this might spark you to make changes in your own life or as you get older and have more power in a corporation to make changes in the corporation. And so I think things like this, again, are very important and impactful because by making information really clear, it can also help people act on it. So example number 3, again, relates to coronavirus. Sorry, I know everyone's sick of coronavirus. This shows the degree to which an infectious disease can be contagious in comparison to coronavirus. And it's really simple. It just uses different faces and it colors them red if they're infected based on how many of those people came in contact with one person with the disease. Now, we've seen this style of infographic a huge amount of times during the coronavirus, especially in relation to variants as well, showing how much more infectious the different variants are. But I think that has a huge impact on us. Like when I see one of these, I'm like, okay, this is bad. I should not go see my friends this weekend because they could all get coronavirus. And so I think infographics, especially during the pandemic, have been super, super, super impactful in just imposing on people the importance of social distancing, of hand washing, of mask wearing. I said earlier, but this whole talk has come out of a request. So I recently did a talk for Apolitical on using infographics, specifically in government, because I work for the feds. Someone asked, hey, like, when do I use infographics? I don't know when to properly use them. So I thought I'd use a text example to sort of draw out where an infographic could be impactful. So this article is about the economic toll that increased numbers of coronavirus is having in Europe. At this time, which might be weeks before I post this video, just letting you guys know, but at this time in November, the cases are rising really steadily in Europe. And this article is about how people are very worried this is going to have a negative effect on their business. So I'll post the article below if you want to read it. It goes into the fact that there has been economic recovery since things opened up, but how now there's a risk of things shutting down and shutting down before Christmas, which is a big financial boom for a lot of independent stores. So it gives some examples of risks that would incur, restrictions that could incur, I guess, because of increased numbers. So things like the lockdown in Austria and vaccine passports in France. It goes on to talk about the economic impact of other waves in Europe and the predictive outcome of these waves here. Again, the fact that they might be worse because of Christmas. So because it's Christmas, they expect a lot of traffic at things like markets, hotels, a lot of tourism. And if rates continue to increase and there are further restrictions, people could see a lot of lost cash. So there are a few instances in this article where I think an infographic could have had a lot of impact and where it would have helped you really easily recognize sort of the risks or things that are going on. So the first would be a graph demonstrating the increase of rates of COVID with the decline of economic benefits. So that way you could see exactly how, as the numbers go up of people getting sick, the money goes down. Again, you need a lot of data to track that, but something like that, you could immediately see a correlation. And even for a person who's not an economist or a doctor, you would be able to see the risk there. So I think secondly, it'd be really nice to have a bar chart. And the bar chart could show different sectors and the amount of revenue they are likely to make in prior years during Christmas, next to the expected returns that they would make if there were restrictions. Now that would be hard in terms of data to procure because it is like an educated guess that you're making. You don't know what the restrictions will be, but it would at least be good to see sort of that financial comparison to see how much money could be lost. Finally, I think it would be nice to see a bunch of different call-outs of the different restrictions that might be imposed, things like lockdowns, passports, all of that, so you have quick iconography to help you identify the results of all this. So when should you not use an infographic? You don't want to use an infographic to sum up a big, long narrative story. Things like that are better suited to a rich picture, a journey map, something that can show the connections between various different data points. An infographic is really a good call out for one single data set or one single insight or conclusion that you really want to draw attention to. It's not good for showing the whole story. It's not good for cramming like a bunch of different complex data points into. It's for something simple with impact that can really make a case rather than like tell a whole story. So I hope that answers some questions around infographics. For me, I like making infographics. I generally still make them in my scribing style, but I do find they have a lot of impact when they're done with very clean vector graphics as well. I'd rather work on something that tells more of a story, but I think infographics are actually extremely challenging because you have to boil something numerical, quite data-oriented into a punchy visual. So if anyone else is like struggling with it, I guess, or having trouble with it, I would say be kind to yourself because it is a more difficult visual field to work in. But if you keep at it and you keep pushing yourself to try and consolidate and make really concise, punchy visuals, I think you'll get there and it'll be super, super satisfying. So thanks for watching my video and hope to see you back soon.